Okay, so hello. We're going to focus now on getting students to read their textbook. So let's talk about some strategies. As you probably know, many faculty complain quite a bit about students not reading the textbook. So we're going to talk about whether or not that's actually the case, and if so, what we can do about it. We'll start by looking at some of the research, and then we'll talk about strategies we can use to increase reading by students and how we can support them with these activities. So first of all, are students not reading? Well, unfortunately, the evidence kind of points to yes. As you can see in this study, almost 80% of the students reported that they weren't reading their textbook at all or just a little bit. So that is a problem. This study also shows us that students weren't reading the textbook before class too often. Only 27% indicated they did. But when given an exam, then the majority of students were reading a textbook. So it speaks to the importance of accountability, which we'll revisit that concept in just a little bit. Students do know they should be reading. That message has kind of gotten across actually pretty loud and clear. They understand that if they don't read, they may not do as well, and they know that their professors are expecting them to engage in put some significant time into the reading activities. You can see here that almost half of them know that they should be reading at least 1 to 3 hours a week, and maybe even more than that. And they know that it's linked to performance. So if they don't read, they know that they won't do as well, and if they do read, they know they'll do better. So we have a lot of evidence that kind of speaks to that. Yet, the data also shows us that student reading is on the decline. And this chart comes from a group of researchers who have been studying this for quite some time, as you can see, and how students were doing on a test that was related to reading. So why is it that students aren't reading? What is causing the decrease in reading? Well, Lay and colleagues talked about some different reasons, both from the student and the faculty perspective. From the student perspective, sometimes they read and they find that it hasn't been a good use of their time. I'm sure we've all had that experience where we read something and we walked away feeling we don't really know much more than we did when we started. So sometimes the books just may be too complex and may feel overwhelming to students. They may not believe in their ability to even do that. We also may find that students don't have interest in the subject matter, so it's really hard to focus on reading a complicated text and something that you just don't have interest or much passion about. As in terms of faculty may, they might be fearful of a negative evaluations, meaning that if you're holding your students accountable for reading and your colleagues down the hall aren't, then your students may feel like they're going to take that out on you on the evaluations because your class is, quote, harder than their class. And that can be a negative impact for faculty, which they may not want to really up the game in terms of accountability. What I mean by developmental student mindset is that many students, especially in open access institutions, have some developmental needs, and faculty often can maybe not believe in those students quite as much as they should. So instead of expecting them to reach the high level bar, they're kind of lowering the bar, and that's really what we want to avoid. We don't want to do that. Sometimes faculty are doing that because of prior experiences. They've asked, they've begged, they've encouraged, they've explained all the reasons why you should read, and yet students still don't read. So that does happen, and faculty often, they kind of get defeated, I guess, or deflated by that, and they need to kind of reset and refocus their expectations. All right, so what is it that we can do since we've already established this is a problem? So most importantly, we have to focus on what are some interventions. Well, one intervention or way to approach this really is to ask students, what do you think will help you engage in reading? And that's exactly what Stratton did. They asked students. And students indicated if they had more time, they'd read. Well, we can't really give them more time. We're all kind of equal in that way with the same number of minutes every day. But we can help them with time management. And they also said that we need to provide some kind of motivator. So give them a quiz on the content, hold them accountable, and don't spoon feed them everything from the book, during the lecture. We don't need to cover it all. We need to, kind of leave some mystery out there in the text so that there's a reason for them to read. So a couple of motivational strategies could be the quiz or giving reading assignments. So let's take a look at some of the literature behind these approaches. Well, there's a lot of literature that supports the quiz. Quizzing is a very powerful tool, and engaging students in frequent quizzing is a great way for them to engage in what's called practice retrieval. There's actually something called the testing effect that the more you do that, the better you're going to learn the content. So it's definitely advisable to do that. Some faculty like to use the pop quiz approach, and students hate that. I don't know if you know that or not, but they do not like it. And I think the main reason is that some faculty, not all, but some faculty use that in a gotcha kind of way. Like, I don't think that you read today, so we're going to take a quiz. So they view it as kind of a punitive process rather than an accountable, way to hold them accountable for the readings. So what I like about what Ruscio wrote about was he came up with an alternative to the pop quiz. And basically he told his students at the beginning of the semester, I'm going to flip a coin at the start of every class, and if it's heads, we're going to take the quiz, and if it's tails, we're not. And students were fine with that. They felt like it was fair because it didn't feel like the gotcha. So just a little bit of a twist on the pop quiz if you like to use that approach. Now, Ryan looked at not just the quiz, but also homework assignments based on the reading. So here in this particular study, what they did was they randomly assigned classes to one of three conditions. It was either the quizzing condition, the homework condition with just like a check mark kind of feedback, or the homework condition where there was more extensive feedback. And here is an example of the homework that was the reading assignment. So I'll give you a minute to read that. Okay, and here are the results. So what you can see by the yellow bars, which are the highest bars, those were the focus worksheets with significant feedback. So that really made a difference. It seems like the feedback is kind of the key ingredient here, but you can imagine being a student and how helpful even those questions probably are to you when you're reading. It gives you some focus and attention while you're reading the chapter, but then getting feedback on whether your answers are on or off target is also incredibly helpful. Yeah, also incredibly time consuming, but very helpful for the students. Some faculty like to use more of an extra credit approach, so they might use like a quiz at the beginning of class that isn't punitive, but could give them bonus points or something on some kind of upcoming assignment or exam if they do well. So that's just kind of another approach, and research has shown that students like that. They certainly view extra credit positively. And some other ideas is you might want to ask different groups of students to maybe present on some of the reading content. So it could be an informal presentation in class. It could be some kind of group project that they work on or work together on those focus worksheets. So a lot of different ideas. I think the point is if the reading is really important, you want to try to integrate it into the way that you design your course. Now, let's go back to that initial reason why students didn't want to read, and many of them indicated it's because they didn't understand or believe in their ability. So what we can do is we can help in this area, really. There's many different strategies that we can use. First of all, we can be clear about what our expectation is with the reading. We might be able to focus their attention by giving them some kind of homework assignment or focused worksheet. We can also assist them with some general reading strategies, and we can provide them with some support. So let's go through the different ways that we can support students. Well, look at the first approach, on the left-hand side of your screen. Read chapter 1. Well, that's, I think, what most of us do, but it may not be targeted enough. So if we actually gave them specific tasks to do, here are some things I want you to zoom in on or focus on. Here are some questions that I want you to answer. Here's the PowerPoint slides before you read, and I want you to use those to take notes while you're reading before you even get to class. So if we give them some direct guidance as to how to attack that reading, that can be quite helpful. Now, this is a really powerful study that I want to share with you. I love this study because it really just, it's a classic, and it drives a very important point home. Here's what Recht and Leslie did. They actually did this study with elementary school students who either had high baseball knowledge or low baseball knowledge. And they knew whether or not their students were good readers or poor readers based on testing that they already conducted. And what they did here was they asked students to read a passage on baseball, and then they took a test. And if you look at the results that are in this table here, the students who were good readers, who had the high baseball knowledge, did the best on the test. The students who were poor readers and didn't know much about baseball did the worst on the test. That part's not really exciting. It's kind of exactly what you would expect. But the magic and the exciting part of this study was really the other two boxes. When you look closely, you'll see that good readers who didn't know much about baseball did almost as poorly as the poor readers who didn't know about baseball. And the poor readers who knew about baseball did almost as well as the folks who are, low in baseball knowledge and poor reading. So the idea here is that our students and all of us really, we're going to understand something if we have background knowledge in it. So in this particular experiment, knowing about baseball significantly helped even the poor readers do well. And it significantly hurt even the good readers from performing well. So background knowledge plays a really, really, really powerful role in whether or not students will comprehend the text. Now, think about what we ask students to do. They don't have a lot of comprehensive background in that subject unless they're, far along, maybe they're a senior or something in their area of interest, their major. If they're taking an introductory course, they may not have any background knowledge or very limited background knowledge. So what are we supposed to do about that? Well, one quick idea that I think really is quite powerful is to do a mini lecture before you ask them to read. So instead of saying, go read this and then we're going to come to class and discuss it, what if you gave a 5-7 minute lecture that really spoke to maybe some of the key points, giving them an organizational schema, helping them get excited about the content and be able to have a little bit of background knowledge before they go and read the chapter. And what also if we gave them some tools within the textbook? So obviously the table of contents is a great outline of what's going to be covered. And that can help students, again, understand the organizational structure of the information they'll be receiving as they read that chapter. And then the chapter summaries are often at the end of a chapter, but what if we encourage students to read them first? Again, they're not going to give them all the details, but it would give you a little bit of background information before actually reading that chapter. And then we could also, of course, teach them reading strategies such as 3R, SQ, 3R. So let's take a closer look at those reading strategies. So 3R is the read, recite, review method. And basically what students should be doing if they're using that method is they read a short chunk of a chapter. It might even be a paragraph. It could be a small section. After they read that chunk, they close the book. And, you could engage in this verbally, but I'm a big fan of writing it down so you have something to work off of later when you're studying. So I always tell my students to do a written, component for the recite part, and they're writing a summary of what they just read in their own words. Now, the key is that the book has to be closed because most students, when they're taking notes while reading, are purely copying. Copying is a very low-level task that's not getting them engaged with the content. It doesn't do anything really except for waste their time. So instead, you want them to close the book and put it in their own words so that they're starting to internalize that content. The third R then is to review. Now you open the book up again, you go back over the section you just read, look at your notes and see did I miss anything, and at that point you can fill in any of the gaps. Well, the SQ3R is basically that same process but with 2 additional steps at the front end. First, survey. So it encourages students to flip through every page and just get a sense of what kind of content. Are there charts, pictures? What are you going to encounter when you read this chapter? The next part is Q, question. Many textbook chapters come with questions at the beginning of a chapter, but if it doesn't, then maybe after skimming it quickly, develop some of your own questions that you think you might be able to answer. Or, as I said before, as faculty, we can also provide those questions for our students. So these are great reading strategies to use as well. But I want to emphasize once more that the most important issue really is that we've helped them get that foundational background knowledge. The strategy is only going to carry you so far. You have to know a little bit about the subject matter in order to get a lot out of the reading. The other way we can help them is providing some online support. So maybe you take an article that's complex and you can see on the left-hand side those little tiny speakers. Those are audio files. So if the student clicks on that, what I'm doing for students is I'm explaining to them, okay, this is the abstract, here's the key, overview of the study. It's so important that you read this part. Please don't skip it. I know it's in italics and a lot of students like to skip an abstract when they're reading peer review. And then, you walk them through, okay, so over here, I'm going to translate this for you and assist them in learning that. You can do that using tools like Adobe Pro, or you can use that using free tools like Screencast-O-Matic that I'm even using for these videos when you have the resource in front of you on the screen. Kind of just walking them through it. And you don't need to do it for every reading, but maybe you do it in the beginning of the semester to help them. So in summary or in conclusion, there are two key factors that really matter. One is we need to hold students accountable. So if we don't give it a grade, if we don't count it in some way, chances are they're not going to do it. So it may be that we're counting it on the test, but we don't want them to wait till the last minute. So think about quizzes, reading assignments, things of that nature. The second part is if we're going to ask them to do a complicated task like reading pretty dense textbooks, we need to be ready to step up our game in terms of support. And as you heard me say, there are some online tools you can do. You can restructure the way you lecture, where you're giving a preview lecture before you ask them to read. You can give them guiding questions, etc. So I hope that this has been helpful to you and will help you get your students to read.